the new Steve McQueen anthology film series, which is, I guess, dropping on Amazon Prime,
Yeah,
called Small Acts. And
BC in England.
the first episode came out this past weekend on Amazon Prime, and I watched it, Dave. And it's called Mangrove, and it stars Letitia Wright, probably is the most famous person in this, but Sean Parks, Malachi Kirby, Rashonda Sandel, probably some people that aren't so well known, but um, Steve McQueen. Last time, what we really talked about him was Widows.
Yep, 2018.
Great movie, underrated movie.
Underrated, underseen, underappreciated.
Probably
Widows
one
is
of my
awesome, and it deserved better, frankly.
probably one of my most memorable movie going moments when
Yeah.
people when the twist in Widows comes about. Very very memorable.
Mm-hmm.
But check out our review for that. Mangrove, Dave. I mean, this is just awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Really good. Premiered at the New York Film Festival, and they showed, I think, three episodes.
Yep, 3 of the 5.
And it seems like they each have a distinctive feel. But this one, which focused on a story in Notting Hill about police harassing and systemic racism in this small town, to harass this Trinidadian person who is opening his own restaurant, and then the race protest that came from that. Very very captivating film, and Steve McQueen, obviously the first Black man to win the Academy Award for Best Director. Very accomplished filmmaker, tells these sorts of stories really well. I think he was just in total command here, and there's so much to dig into. But I wanted to kind of seed the floor and just kind of get your thoughts before we start breaking down what we really liked or didn't like.
Yeah, just to clarify, it was first Black director to win Best Picture. McQueen didn't actually win Best Director that year, but still, he's clearly a world-class filmmaker. I think everyone knows that by now. And to me, like, just going into Small Acts, I was like, it just in my neurotic brain, I was like, how do I quantify what the hell this is? Because it's called an anthology film series, but then also called a TV series. And I'm like, is this like Black Mirror? Can I just think about it that way, right? But it premiered, as you said, at New York Film Festival. Film, emphasis on the film there. And it's going week to week. From what we know, like half of this run are feature length films for the most part, but not all of them are. I guess I'm going to think of it as a TV series, but it's really a series of movies, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, doesn't really matter doesn't really matter because the work is the work. And going into this, I was actually going to Mangrove specifically. I was most interested to see Malachi Kirby because Malachi Kirby, actually, you have seen him before. Black Mirror season 3, Men Against Fire episode. That's the first season that Netflix made. Men Against Fire, not one of the most well liked ones. He plays like this future military man who's killing people, and then he finds out that what he's seeing is he's killing civilians and stuff. Kind of a mediocre concept for Black Mirror standards, but Kirby was the lead there. And the reason I wanted to see more of him was because he hasn't done much since that. But I remember seeing a John Boyega interview, and John Boyega is in the 3rd episode of Small Acts. And Boyega cited Kirby as one of those one of his peers as a young talented Black actor from England. And I'm like, I should really keep an eye out for Malachi Kirby. And sure enough, he gets cast in the Steve McQueen project. I think that's a good enough co-sign as any. And he really stood out to me in this for sure. And then, of course, his fellow Black Mirror alum, Letitia Wright, is great as well. But it's hard not to think about Mangrove without also thinking about something we talked about recently, which would be the trial of Chicago 7. Very similar subject matter. The real life events are taking place only a year and a half, 2 years apart, albeit on different continents. And Steve McQueen's treatment of the material and his attitudes and the way what he focuses on is quite different, of course, from what we expect from Aaron Sorkin. So they are quite the companion piece, I would say.
Yeah. I think when I was left sitting with this film pretty much the whole rest of the day after I watched it, and I think what I was really most taken by in this movie is how McQueen does such a wonderful and really like he's really in command of his ability to develop these relationships and really like make you get the sense of what this place was, what it felt like to live there if you were a black person living there. And he does it in a way where the first half of the film is super engaging and fun. You just kind of want to live in this world and party with these people and dance around and play the steel drums. And then it so quickly becomes a totally brilliant uh, courtroom drama, which is just super enthralling. And it's just like two very distinct movies that seamlessly transition together and build out to be, I think, larger than the sum of their parts in a lot of ways. You know,
Mhm.
the messages and all the different topics of racism and it was just really really well done. And you're totally right. I actually found myself afterwards like sometimes calling it like the trial of Mangrove or something like that because
Yeah,
it
the Mangrove
feels
9, I think, is what they
yeah
were called.
yeah it feels so much like the trial of the Chicago Seven, especially even how they're like using like the newspapers and stuff to
Mhm.
um real and just like the media stuff to like acknowledge these pieces. It's very interesting. You mentioned Malachi Kirby. I thought obviously playing Darkus, he had probably one of the meatiest roles. Darkus representing himself in court, really pushing forward the movement and keeping in mind of identifying the systemic racism going on is kind of the point of this whole thing. At least for him, uh, I really like Letitia Wright as well, but the actor that played the restaurant keeper,
Yeah. What's his
Sean
name?
Parks,
Yeah,
I thought he was brilliant as
yeah,
well.
definitely.
I thought he had one of the most interesting roles as he kind of like teetered on this like reluctant leader, kind of just wanting to be a restaurant owner type person, wanting to create this
Right.
community, but also being a protector. Um, I felt like he had a very fine line to walk, and I thought he did it brilliantly. How did you feel about his performance?
Yeah, no, I think he's really good, right? Because he demonstrates like that pain and that rage from
Hmm.
a different perspective, right? Letitia
Yeah.
Wright's character is a Black Panther. She
Hmm.
is a young, educated, politically minded person. It's a different perspective, right? And you see how, this guy running a restaurant, he's going to have a different perspective on this. And apparently, they don't actually like spend too much time talking about. I think it was the Rio, like a previous establishment that had other run-ins with the police, right? But like you can tell, he he's just kind of losing his grip, right, as the
Hmm.
police continue to harass them. And I think, and credit to McQueen because the way he builds everything up in Mangrove, which again, it's a 2 hour movie, right? The
Hmm.
way he builds everything up is there's just a sense of dread and devastation in the beginning. And I think when you get that like probably this, I think it's the second police raid, the long one where it ends with like a kitchen bowl spinning on the ground for an extended
Yeah.
period of time, and you just like it like honestly it kind of like made me tear up a little bit because I thought like it's just it really effectively I think communicates just the systemic issues at the heart of this real life story, right?
Yeah.
And then we transition to, I think, something that's a little more conventional, which is that courtroom stuff. Not a whole lot different than what we got from Sorkin. I think the speeches, you still kind of get some speechifying, right?
Hmm.
And you have a notable judge once again. Um,
Hmm.
but I think McQueen, he has a certain tact as a filmmaker, and he never lets it get hokey or preachy, right?
Yeah.
And I think at the end, right when they get the not guilty verdict, and the camera the whole time it's focusing on
The
the
black
faces of
juror.
defendants, right? We're not getting Joseph Gordon-Levitt being portrayed as the kind of good bad guy, right? It's
Hmm.
like there's just a different frame of reference, I think, going in. And like I said, definitely a good companion piece. I think Mangrove, uh, it's just operating at a higher level than Chicago 7, but they're also trying to do different things. Chicago 7's more idealistic,
Hmm.
has Sorkin's politics a little more open, but Mangrove, I think if I think it's very instructive, and you know, as an ignorant American, a piece of history that I was not aware of at all. So definitely happy it exists.
Yeah, I think one of the things McQueen does, and when you think about his filmography and the types of stories he tells, is he really considers the perspective of the person and how their history affects that. I'm forgetting the name of the one, but the mother, right, the one who had been orphaned as a child,
Mhm.
and was worried about if her and her husband went to jail, what would happen to their young son. I think it's Darkus's wife, which
Yep.
is a
Yes.
bit reductive to say, but I'm blanking on the name at the moment. Um, I really liked how he brought in her perspective into this, and sometimes it felt a little bit forced. Like it felt like that was just kind of like roped in at times. But I think the larger message is that these were nine individuals who were facing the same or similar charges for being part of the same event, who all lead completely different lives, but are lumped in together based on the color of their skin, right? And it does that. I think it tells that so effectively by the way it builds out who each of they really highlight, I think, four or five of them to like build out their background, but I think it so effectively just kind of captures how when you're within this system of racism, you can be a light skinned black person who's well educated and has this Black Panther background where they're kind of helping to like make these issues known, or you could be the shopkeeper who's just kind of thrust into being this community leader who might not have as much education that but has that lived experience, and
Yeah.
you're all the same within that system.
I also quite liked Jack Loudon's presence as the lawyer who's helping them, kind of
Yeah.
playing this like precocious young attorney. And it's notable. I think he's it's a small role, but he always seems to jump in at the right time, and like the smirk he gives at times when he's trying to needle the judge seems to be effective. But at the end of the day, they don't let him be like the savior of the nine. It's the grandstanding you get from Letitia Wright and Malachi Kirby's characters at the end of the day is what uh,
Mhm.
probably secures their not guilty verdict. Right, the fact that they represented themselves and were able to use their intelligence to point out the you know the errors in the case pretty obviously, right?
Mhm.
But I liked Loudon. He's had he has had small roles from time to time. He's in Capone, for example,
Yep.
this year. But I thought he was pretty good.
That when they first open the trial and he's like trying to say that the jurors should be all black, and I forgot what it was. I think the judge says something like, well, let's not make this a race thing, and he like sits back down and he like acts like he's all pissed, but then he starts to smile. Like I thought that
Yeah,
was such a brilliant like piece of acting from him, because it obviously like kind of gets across the point of this is what they were trying to do, knowing it would fail, but just having it said made a difference.
yeah.
I don't know. There were a lot of really. It was a nicely done movie. A lot of special touches on it. Any last thoughts? We're gonna keep up with this, so
Yeah,
we'll be
we're gonna
talking about it.
since they're all for the most part near feature length, if not feature length. We'll do this every week. Next week we have Lovers Rock, also screening near film festival, also critically acclaimed. Has already aired in the BBC. England's a week ahead of us with this. And Lovers Rock's only an hour and 8 minutes. Probably, I think it's actually one of the shorter ones. The week 3 is an hour 20, the Boyega episode. But Lovers Rock apparently is very great as well. So happy to keep it going with small acts. And I would say Netflix, do this with Black Mirror. Let's
Yeah,
spread it out, man. Because when you have this stuff that I think is this dense because it's longer and it's an anthology thing, it's a brand new thing every week. Spread it out. It works better.
it sits with you more for sure.